Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he loaded the last of his tools into his beat-up Ford pickup truck. The Virginia sun was setting behind the half-built house where he had been working for the past 12 hours. His back ached. His hands were rough from handling lumber all day, but there was something different about today. Tomorrow he would not be here swinging a hammer or laying foundation stones. For the first time in 3 years, Jake was taking a vacation. He drove home to the small house he shared with his mother on the outskirts of Farmville, Virginia. The paint was peeling on the front porch, and the screen door had a small tear that he kept meaning to fix. But inside, the smell of his mother's cooking always made everything feel like home. "How was work today, honey?" his mother Linda called from the kitchen. She was sitting at the small wooden table, sorting through a pile of medical bills. Even though she tried to hide them, Jake could see the worry lines on her face getting deeper each month. "Good, Mom. Real good." Jake kissed the top of her head. "And guess what? I finally saved enough for that trip to Virginia Beach I've been talking about." Linda looked up at her son with tired but proud eyes. "Oh, Jake, you should spend that money on something more important." "These doctor bills? No way." Jake sat down beside her and gently moved the bills aside. "You've been fighting this lupus for 2 years now. I've been working double shifts, picking up weekend jobs, doing everything I can. But you know what I realized? I can't take care of you if I don't take care of myself sometimes too." The truth was, Jake had not had a real break since his father died 4 years ago. Between supporting his mother and paying off her medical expenses, every dollar went toward bills and necessities. But his boss had given him a small bonus last month for completing a difficult project ahead of schedule, and Jake decided it was time to do something just for himself. 3 days at the beach, Jake continued. "I've got a cheap motel room and I plan to do absolutely nothing but walk on the sand and eat way too much seafood." Linda smiled for the first time that day. "You deserve this, son. You really do." The next morning, Jake packed his single small suitcase with 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, and his only pair of flip-flops. The drive to Virginia Beach took 4 hours, but Jake enjoyed every minute. He rolled down the windows, played his favorite country music loud, and for once did not think about work schedules or medical appointments. The Seahorse Motel was nothing fancy. The carpet was old, the air conditioner made strange noises, and the view from his window showed the parking lot instead of the ocean. But it was clean, affordable, and only 3 blocks from the beach. Jake had never stayed in a hotel by himself before, and even this simple room felt like luxury. That evening, he walked to the boardwalk and bought a fish sandwich from a food stand. The ocean was bigger and more beautiful than he had imagined. Growing up in rural Virginia, Jake had seen lakes and rivers, but never anything like this endless stretch of blue water meeting the sky. He sat on a bench and watched families playing in the surf, couples walking hand in hand, and children building sandcastles. Jake went to bed that night feeling more relaxed than he had in years. He woke up at dawn, which was unusual for someone on vacation, but old habits die hard. Instead of lying in bed, Jake decided to take a walk on the beach before the crowds arrived. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the sound of waves was the most peaceful thing he had ever heard. The beach was almost empty except for a few joggers and someone walking their dog in the distance. Jake rolled up his jeans and let the cold water wash over his feet. For the first time in months, his mind was not racing with worry about his mother's health or whether there would be enough work next week. That's when he saw her. About 50 yards down the beach, a young woman was in the water. At first, Jake thought she was just swimming, but something looked wrong. The waves were rougher than they had been the day before, and she seemed to be struggling. Jake stopped walking and watched more carefully. The woman was definitely in trouble. She was trying to swim toward shore, but the current was pulling her further out. Jake could see her arms flailing as she fought against the water. She went under for a moment, then came back up, coughing and gasping. Jake did not hesitate. He kicked off his shoes and ran into the surf, diving under the first big wave. The water was colder than he expected, and the current was stronger than it looked from shore. Jake was a good swimmer. He had learned in the creek behind his childhood home, but this was different. The ocean had its own power. He swam as hard as he could toward the woman. When he got close enough, he could see that she was young, probably around his age, with long blonde hair that was now plastered to her head. Her eyes were wide with panic. "I've got you," Jake shouted over the sound of the waves. "Don't fight me, just let me help." The woman tried to grab onto him, But Jake had learned basic water rescue techniques during his volunteer firefighter training back home. He turned her around so that her back was against his chest, then began swimming toward shore using a side stroke. It was exhausting work. The waves kept pushing them back and the woman was dead weight in his arms. For a moment, Jake wondered if they were both going to drown. His lungs burned, his arms felt like lead, and the shore seemed impossibly far away. But then his feet touched sand, and he knew they were going to make it. Jake dragged the woman onto the beach and laid her on her back. She was unconscious and not breathing. His hands shaking, Jake tilted her head back, checked her airway, and began CPR. He had practiced this dozens of times in training, but never on a real person. After what felt like forever but was probably only 30 seconds, the woman coughed up seawater and began breathing again. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. "You're okay," Jake said, still breathing hard from the rescue. "You're on the beach. You're safe." By now, someone had called 911 and Jake could hear sirens in the distance. A small crowd had gathered, and several people were asking if they could help. Jake stayed beside the woman, making sure she kept breathing normally. The paramedics arrived quickly and took over. They wrapped the woman in blankets, checked her vital signs, and prepared to take her to the hospital for observation. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, she looked back at Jake. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse from the salt water, but her eyes were clear now. "What's your name?" Jake Morrison. "I'm Sophia." She tried to sit up, but the paramedics gently pushed her back down. "How can I ever thank you?" "You saved my life. Just get better," Jake said. "That's all the thanks I need." The ambulance drove away and the crowd slowly scattered. Jake stood alone on the beach, soaking wet and shivering, suddenly aware that his vacation had just taken an unexpected turn. He looked at his waterlogged phone and realized it was ruined. His wallet was soaked too, but his room key had survived. As Jake walked back to his motel to change clothes, he kept thinking about the woman, Sophia. He hoped she would be okay. She had seemed so grateful, so genuine in that moment when she thanked him. There had been something about her eyes that stuck with him. A mixture of fear and relief and something else he could not quite identify. Jake had always been the kind of person who helped others without expecting anything in return. It came naturally to him, probably because his father had raised him that way. But as he peeled off his wet clothes and took a hot shower, he could not stop thinking about Sophia and wondering if he would ever see her again. Jake spent the rest of his first day at Virginia Beach feeling restless. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see Sophia's face when she thanked him. He kept wondering if she was okay, if the doctors had found anything wrong, if she had family with her at the hospital, but there was no way to find out. He did not even know her last name. He bought a cheap replacement phone at a convenience store and called his mother to let her know he was safe. He did not mention the rescue. Linda would only worry about him taking unnecessary risks, and she had enough to worry about already. The next 2 days passed slowly. Jake tried to enjoy his vacation. He walked the boardwalk, ate at different restaurants, and even bought a Virginia Beach t-shirt for his mother. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman he had pulled from the ocean. He found himself scanning faces in crowds, hoping to catch a glimpse of blonde hair or those distinctive green eyes. On his final morning, Jake was packing his small suitcase when someone knocked on his motel room door. He was not expecting anyone, and for a moment he wondered if it was the motel manager asking about checkout time. When he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. Sophia stood in the hallway looking completely different from the last time he had seen her. Her hair was clean and styled, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple blue sundress and sandals, but something about the way she carried herself suggested these were not ordinary clothes. Her skin had a healthy glow, and those green eyes that had been filled with panic 3 days ago now sparkled with life. "Hi," she said, looking almost nervous. "I hope this is not weird, me showing up like this. I wanted to find you before you left." Jake stood there for a moment, completely speechless. How did you find me?" Sophia smiled, and Jake noticed she had a small dimple in her left cheek. Paramedics kept records of the incident. I may have convinced them to share some information about my hero." "Your hero?" Jake felt his cheeks getting warm. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, you did not." Sophia's voice became serious. "Most people would have called for help and waited. You jumped in without thinking about your own safety. The doctor said if you had waited even 2 more minutes, I might not have made it. Jake stepped aside and gestured for her to come in, then realized his motel room was tiny and messy. Clothes were scattered on the bed, and his work boots sat by the door, still sandy from his beach walks. "Actually, would you like to get some coffee?" he asked quickly. "There's a diner across the street. I mean, if you have time. You probably have places to be." "I would love to get coffee," Sophia said. "I was hoping you would say that." The diner was one of those classic American places with red booths, black and white checkered floors, and a menu that had not changed since the 1980s. Jake had eaten breakfast there every morning of his stay, and the waitress, Betty, greeted him like an old friend. "Well, look who brought a pretty girl with him today," Betty said with a wink as they sat down. "Coffee for both of you?" Jake looked at Sophia, who nodded. "2 coffees, please, and could we get some of those blueberry pancakes? They're amazing here." "You got it, honey." As Betty walked away, Sophia looked around the diner with genuine interest. "This place has character. I love these old diners." "Really? I thought you might be more of a fancy restaurant type. What made you think that?" Sophia asked, tilting her head. Jake gestured vaguely at her appearance. "I don't know. You just seem polished, I guess. Like you're used to nice things." Sophia laughed, and the sound was warm and genuine. "Trust me, I'm much more comfortable in places like this than you might think. Tell me about yourself, Jake Morrison. What do you do when you're not rescuing people from the ocean?" Over coffee and pancakes, Jake found himself opening up in a way he rarely did with strangers. There was something about Sophia that made him feel comfortable, like he could tell her anything. He told her about his construction work, about how much he loved building things with his hands, creating something solid and lasting. "My dad was a carpenter," Jake explained, cutting into his pancakes. "He always said there was honor in making something that would outlast you. I've been working construction since I was 18, right after high school." "Did you ever think about college?" Sophia asked. "For about 5 minutes," Jake said with a laugh. "My grades were decent, but we did not have money for that. And then my dad got sick, and later my mom." He trailed off, not wanting to burden her with his family's problems. But Sophia leaned forward, her expression encouraging. "What happened with your mom?" Jake found himself telling her about Linda's lupus diagnosis, about the medical bills that seemed to multiply every month, about working extra shifts and weekend jobs to stay ahead of the expenses. He talked about how guilty he felt taking this vacation when that money could have gone toward his mother's treatment. "She insisted I come," Jake said. "Said I needed to take care of myself too. But honestly, this is the first time I've done something just for me in I can't even remember how long." Sophia listened without interrupting, and Jake noticed that her eyes never left his face. She was not just being polite. She seemed genuinely interested in everything he was saying. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Sophia said finally. "And you sound like an incredible son." Jake felt embarrassed by the compliment. "I'm just doing what needs to be done. What about you?" "What kind of work do you do?" For just a moment, Sophia hesitated. "I'm in business. Import and export mostly. It involves a lot of travel." "That sounds exciting. Do you like it?" "Sometimes," Sophia said carefully. "It can be lonely being on the road so much, and the business world can be challenging. People are not always what they seem." Jake sensed there was more to the story, but he did not want to pry. "Is that why you were in Virginia?" "For work? Partly. I was actually looking at colleges in the area. My younger brother is thinking about applying next year, and I wanted to check them out for him." They talked for 2 hours, long after their pancakes were gone and Betty had refilled their coffee cups 3 times. Jake learned that Sophia loved to read, especially classic literature. She could quote entire passages from books he had never heard of, but she did it in a way that did not make him feel stupid or uneducated. Sophia, in turn, seemed fascinated by Jake's stories about small-town Virginia life. She asked detailed questions about his work, about the houses he helped build, about what it was like growing up in a place where everyone knew everyone else. "It sounds wonderful," she said wistfully. "All that community, all those connections. It can be nice," Jake agreed. "But it can also feel limiting sometimes. Like everyone expects you to stay exactly the same as you were in high school." When they finally left the diner, Sophia suggested they spend the day together. "If you don't mind showing a California girl around Virginia Beach, I feel like I barely saw anything before my swimming adventure." Jake's heart jumped at the suggestion, but he tried to play it cool. I'd like that, though I should warn you, I'm probably not the most exciting tour guide. They spent the afternoon walking the boardwalk, visiting the aquarium, and talking about everything and nothing. Sophia bought them both ice cream, and when Jake tried to pay her back, she waved him off. It's 2 ice cream cones, not a car payment, she said with a laugh, but Jake noticed other small things throughout the day. The way Sophia never looked at price tags when they stopped in shops. How she seemed completely comfortable when they wandered into an expensive art gallery. The casual way she mentioned flying to different cities, as if plane tickets were no big deal. As evening approached, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. Her expression changed as she read it. I have to go, she said, looking genuinely disappointed. My flight leaves in a few hours. Back to California? Yes, but Jake... She turned to face him fully. I know this might sound crazy, but I feel like I've known you forever. Today has been one of the best days I've had in a long time. Jake felt the same way, but he was afraid to say it out loud. I had a great time too. They exchanged phone numbers, and Sophia insisted on putting her contact information into his new phone herself. As she handed it back to him, their fingers touched briefly, and Jake felt a spark of electricity. Will you call me? Sophia asked. I know we live on opposite sides of the country, but I'll call you, Jake promised. If you want me to. Sophia stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek softly. I want you to. As Jake watched her walk away toward the parking lot, he realized his simple vacation had turned into something much more complicated. He was falling for a woman he barely knew, who lived 3,000 miles away, and who seemed to exist in a completely different world from his own. But as he drove back to Virginia the next morning, Jake could not stop smiling. For the first time in years, he felt like something exciting was about to happen in his life. Jake called Sophia the day after he got home from Virginia Beach, just like he promised. He was nervous as the phone rang, wondering if she would even answer or if their connection had just been a vacation fantasy. Jake. Her voice was bright and happy, and he could hear the smile through the phone. I was hoping you would call. How was the drive home? They talked for an hour that first night, and it felt as natural as their conversation in the diner. Sophia wanted to know about his mother, about his work, about everything in his daily life. Jake found himself looking forward to their calls more than anything else in his day. Within a week, they were texting constantly. Good morning messages, photos of their lunch, random thoughts throughout the day. Sophia would send him pictures of California sunsets, and Jake would respond with photos of the construction sites where he worked. She seemed genuinely interested in his projects, asking detailed questions about the houses he was building. Show me the foundation you poured today. She would text, and Jake would send her pictures of concrete and rebar, feeling silly but happy that someone cared about his work. Their first video call happened 2 weeks after Virginia Beach. Jake was nervous about how he looked on camera, sitting in his small bedroom with the faded wallpaper his mother had put up 15 years ago. But when Sophia's face appeared on his phone screen, all his worries disappeared. There you are, she said softly. I was starting to forget how blue your eyes were. They video called 3 times a week after that, sometimes for hours. Jake would prop his phone against a lamp and talk to Sophia while he ate dinner or worked on small repair projects around the house. She would do the same, and Jake caught glimpses of her life in California. The first thing he noticed was how nice her apartment seemed to be. What he could see in the background looked expensive. Modern furniture, artwork on the walls, huge windows with views of what looked like mountains or hills. When he mentioned it, Sophia laughed it off. Oh, this is not really my place, she said. I'm staying at a friend's apartment while she's traveling. My actual place is much smaller. Jake accepted the explanation easily. After all, he knew people sometimes house sat for others, and Sophia had mentioned that her work involved a lot of travel. As the weeks turned into months, Jake learned more about Essie. Ophia's life. Though she always seemed vague about certain details, she traveled frequently for work, sometimes to New York, sometimes to other countries. She would text him from airports and hotel rooms, sharing stories about delayed flights and terrible room service. I'm in Chicago for 3 days, she would write. The client is demanding, but the project should be worth it. Jake was impressed by how successful she seemed to be. When he asked what exactly her import-export business involved, Sophia would give general answers about connecting manufacturers with retailers, facilitating international trade deals. It sounded complicated and important, and Jake felt proud to be dating someone so accomplished, but sometimes small things did not quite add up. During one video call, Sophia mentioned casually that she had just gotten back from London. "The flight was terrible," she said. "Even in first class, I could barely sleep." Jake almost did not catch it, but later he wondered why someone would fly first class for a business trip. Every business traveler he knew flew coach to save money. When he brought it up during their next call, Sophia quickly explained that her company had a corporate account with the airline that included automatic upgrades. Another time, she sent him a photo of her dinner, some fancy-looking dish with ingredients he could not even pronounce. The restaurant looked incredibly expensive, with white tablecloths and crystal glasses. "Client dinner," she texted. "The food is amazing, but I'd rather be eating pizza with you." Jake smiled at the sweet message, but he could not help thinking about how often Sophia seemed to be at high-end restaurants for work. His construction company sometimes took clients out to dinner too, but it was usually to the local steakhouse or maybe Applebee's. The differences in their worlds became more obvious when Jake's mother had a health scare in November. Linda collapsed at home one evening, and Jake had to rush her to the emergency room. The doctors said her lupus was flaring up badly, and she needed a new treatment that was not covered by her insurance. Jake called Sophia from the hospital parking lot, feeling overwhelmed and scared. "The treatment costs $8,000, he told her, his voice breaking. "I don't know where I'm going to get that kind of money. I've already taken out a second mortgage on the house, and my credit cards are maxed out." "Oh, Jake," Sophia said softly. "I'm so sorry. Your poor mother. Is there anything I can do to help?" "No, but thanks for asking. I'll figure something out. Maybe I can pick up some extra weekend work, or—" "What if I helped?" Sophia interrupted. "I've had a really good year business-wise. I have some money saved up that I'm not using for anything important." Jake was touched by the offer, but his pride kicked in immediately. "I can't take money from you, Sophia. We've only known each other for a few months." "But I care about you," she said. "And I care about your mother. You've told me so much about her, I feel like I know her. Please just think about it." Jake did think about it, lying awake that night in the uncomfortable hospital chair while his mother slept. Part of him wanted to say yes, to accept Sophia's generous offer and give his mother the treatment she needed. But another part of him, the part that sounded like his father's voice, said that a man took care of his own problems. He ended up declining Sophia's help, instead working out a payment plan with the hospital that would take him 2 years to pay off. Sophia seemed disappointed but said she understood. "I just want you to know the offer stands," she said. "Anytime you need help, I'm here." As winter turned to spring, their relationship continued to grow stronger, but the physical distance was becoming harder to handle. Jake wanted desperately to visit California, to see Sophia's world, to hold her in person instead of just through a phone screen. But every time he tried to save money for a plane ticket, something else came up. His truck needed repairs, or his mother needed new medication, or there was an unexpected bill. Sophia offered several times to pay for his flight, but Jake always refused. He was old-fashioned about things like that. If he was going to visit his girlfriend, he was going to pay his own way. "What if you came here instead?" Jake suggested during one of their calls. "Virginia's beautiful in the spring. I could show you around my hometown, introduce you to my mom." "I would love that," Sophia said, but then her expression became complicated. "It's just that work is really crazy right now. I'm in the middle of closing this huge deal and I can't really travel until it's finished." "When do you think that will be? Maybe in a few months?" "It's hard to say with these international contracts. Sometimes they drag on forever." Jake tried to hide his disappointment, but Sophia could see it on his face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this is frustrating. The timing is just really bad right now." Jake's friends were starting to make jokes about his mysterious California girlfriend. His buddy Tommy, who worked construction with him, was particularly skeptical. "Dude, are you sure she's real?" Tommy asked one day during their lunch break. "I mean, you've been talking to this girl for 6 months and you've never even seen her in person except for that one day at the beach." "She's real," Jake said defensively. "We video call all the time. But don't you think it's weird that she can never visit? And that she always has an excuse for why she's too busy with work?" Jake wanted to argue, but privately he was starting to wonder the same thing. Not whether Sophia was real. He knew she was. but whether there was something she was not telling him about her life in California. During their last video call before his birthday in May, Jake caught a glimpse of something that made him pause. Sophia was walking through what looked like a hallway, and for just a moment the camera showed an enormous room behind her with a grand piano and floor-to-ceiling windows. "Wow," Jake said. "That's some friend's apartment you're staying at." Sophia glanced back at the screen and quickly turned the camera away. "Oh, that? Yeah, my friend has interesting taste in decorating. Very over the top." But something in her voice sounded off, and Jake found himself thinking about that glimpse of luxury for days afterward. The room had looked more like a mansion than an apartment, and he was starting to wonder exactly what kind of business Sophia was in that gave her access to places like that. Still, he pushed his doubts aside. Sophia cared about him. He could see it in her eyes during their video calls, hear it in her voice when she asked about his day or his mother's health. Whatever secrets she might have, Jake trusted that she would tell him when she was ready. But late at night, when he was lying in his small bedroom in his small house in small-town Virginia, Jake sometimes wondered if he was falling in love with someone who lived in a completely different world than he could ever understand, and he wondered what would happen when that difference finally caught up with them. Jake was eating lunch at the construction site when Tommy walked over with a magazine in his hand, grinning like he had just won the lottery. "Dude, you're never going to believe this," Tommy said, dropping the magazine on the wooden crate Jake was using as a table. "My wife was reading this business magazine at the doctor's office, and look who's on the cover." Jake glanced down at the magazine and nearly choked on his sandwich. Staring back at him from the glossy cover was Sophia, but she looked completely different. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, she wore a sharp black business suit, and her expression was serious and confident. The headline read, "America's Youngest Female CEOs, How These Women Built Business Empires Before Age 30. But it was the name under her photo that made Jake's heart stop. Sophia Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, net worth $800 million. "That's your girlfriend, right?" Tommy asked, watching Jake's face carefully. "The one from California?" Jake stared at the magazine, reading the headline over and over again. $800 million. CEO, Hartwell Industries. None of it made sense. Sophia had told him she worked in import and export, that she was just an employee traveling for business. "Let me see that," Jake said. Grabbing the magazine, he flipped to the article inside, his hands shaking slightly. There were more photos of Sophia at business conferences, shaking hands with important-looking people, standing in front of massive office buildings. The article talked about how she had inherited Hartwell Industries from her father, who had died suddenly the year before, and how she had successfully taken over the technology and real estate empire at age 24. The youngest Hartwell has proven herself a worthy successor to her father's legacy, the article read. Despite inheriting the company during a difficult transition period, Sophia Hartwell has increased profits by 30% and expanded into new international markets. Jake felt sick to his stomach. Everything Sophia had told him was a lie. She was not just successful in business, she was one of the richest people in America. While he had been worrying about paying his mother's medical bills and saving money for a plane ticket to California, his girlfriend owned private jets and probably had more money than everyone in his hometown combined. "Jake?" Tommy's voice seemed to come from far away. "You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake stood up abruptly, leaving his half-eaten lunch on the crate. "I need to go home." "But we've got 3 more hours on the clock." "I don't care." Jake drove home in a daze, the magazine sitting on the passenger seat beside him. Every traffic light seemed to take forever, and his mind raced with questions. Why had Sophia lied to him? Had she been laughing at him this whole time, amusing herself with some poor construction worker who thought he was dating someone in his own league? When he got home, his mother was in the kitchen making dinner. She took one look at his face and immediately stopped what she was doing. "What's wrong, honey? You look terrible." Jake held up the magazine. "Remember Sophia? My girlfriend from California?" "Of course. The sweet girl you've been talking to for months." "What about her?" "She's not who I thought she was, Mom." Jake's voice was bitter. "She's a billionaire, look." Linda put on her reading glasses and studied the magazine cover. Her eyebrows raised slowly as she read the headline and the caption under Sophia's photo. "Oh my," she said quietly. This is quite a surprise. A surprise. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, she's been lying to me for 8 months. Everything she told me about her life, her work, everything was fake. Now, Jake, you don't know that. Yes, I do. Jake's voice was louder than he intended. She told me she worked for someone else, that she traveled for business, that she stayed at friends' apartments. She's been pretending to be normal while she probably owns half of California. That evening, Jake called Sophia for their usual video chat, but this time he had the magazine sitting right beside his phone. When her face appeared on the screen, she looked happy and relaxed like always. "Hi, handsome," she said with a smile. "How was work today?" "It was interesting," Jake said, his voice cold. "I learned something new about international business." Sophia's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, what did you learn?" Jake held up the magazine so she could see her own face on the cover. "I learned that my girlfriend is apparently one of the richest people in America." Sophia's face went completely white. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Jake could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "Jake, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'd really like to hear this explanation." 8 months, Sophia. 8 months of lies. They weren't lies," Sophia said desperately. "Not about the important things. Everything I told you about my feelings, about caring about you and your mother, all of that was true. But everything else was fake. Your job, your life, your whole identity." Sophia was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant for it to go this far. When we first met, I wanted to be normal for once. Do you have any idea what it's like when people only see dollar signs when they look at you?" "No, I don't," Jake said coldly. "Because I actually am normal. I'm just some guy who works construction and worries about paying bills. I thought you were like me, but you were just playing pretend. That's not fair." "Fair?" Jake's anger was building now. "You know what's not fair? Me feeling guilty about not being able to afford a plane ticket to visit you, while you could probably buy the entire airline. Me refusing your offers to help with my mom's medical bills because I thought you were making sacrifices for us, when $8,000 is probably what you spend on lunch. Jake, please, let me come see you. Let me explain in person. Don't bother. I think I've seen enough." Jake ended the call and threw his phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and clattered to the floor, but he did not care. He felt like the biggest fool in the world. The next day, Jake called in sick to work and spent the morning sitting on his front porch, staring at nothing. He kept thinking about all the little signs he had missed, all the times Sophia's stories had not quite added up. The expensive restaurants, the first-class flights, the luxury surroundings during their video calls. How had he been so blind? Around noon, a black car pulled up in front of his house. Jake had never seen a car like it in his neighborhood. It looked like something celebrities would ride in. When the back door opened and Sophia stepped out, Jake's heart started racing. She was dressed simply in jeans and a t-shirt, but she still looked out of place in his working-class neighborhood. She walked up to his front porch slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might run away. "Hi," she said softly. "What are you doing here?" "I took the first flight I could get." "Jake, we need to talk. I think you've said enough. Or lied enough, I should say." Sophia flinched at the word lied, but did not back down. "I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But please just give me 5 minutes to explain." Before Jake could answer, his mother appeared at the front door. "Is this Sophia?" Linda asked, her voice warm but curious. "The girl from the magazine?" "Yes, ma'am," Sophia said, turning to face her. "You must be Jake's mother. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Linda said with a small smile. "Why don't you both come inside? It's getting hot out here." Jake wanted to refuse, but his mother was already holding the door open and he could not be rude to Sophia in front of her. They all sat in the small living room with its worn furniture and family photos on every surface. "Jake thinks I've been lying to him," Sophia said, addressing Linda directly. "And I suppose in some ways I have, but not about the things that matter." "Such as?" Jake asked coldly. Sophia turned to look at him, her green eyes still red from crying. "Such as the fact that I love you. Such as the fact that these past 8 months have been the happiest of my life. Such as the fact that when I almost drowned that day, you didn't just save my life. You showed me what kind of person I wanted to be with." "So why lie at all?" "Because I was scared," Sophia said simply. "Do you know how many people have pretended to care about me just because of my money? Do you know how many relationships I've had where the person was more interested in my bank account than in me?" Jake felt some of his anger starting to fade, but he fought against it. "So you thought I was like that?" No, Sophia said firmly. That's exactly the point. You weren't like that. You were genuine and kind and real. When you looked at me, you saw Sophia, not Hartwell Industries. I hadn't felt that way in years. Linda had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. Sophia, dear, can I ask you something? Of course. When you offered to help with my medical bills, was that because you felt sorry for us? Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. No, ma'am. It was because I care about Jake, and I could see how much he was struggling. I care about you too, because you raised an incredible son. I wanted to help because I could, not because I thought you needed charity. Jake looked between his mother and Sophia, feeling confused and hurt and angry all at the same time. Before he could say anything, his mother suddenly clutched her chest and slumped forward in her chair. Mom! Jake jumped up and caught her before she could fall. Her face was pale and she was breathing rapidly. Call 911, he said to Sophia, but she was already on her phone. The paramedics arrived quickly and rushed Linda to the hospital. Jake rode in the ambulance, holding his mother's hand and praying she would be okay. By the time they reached the emergency room, Sophia was already there, somehow having arrived before them. The doctor said Linda was having complications from her lupus and needed immediate treatment from a specialist, but the hospital specialist was not available, and they would have to wait until morning to transfer her to another facility. What if we brought a specialist here? Sophia asked quietly, appearing beside Jake in the waiting room. They don't do that, Jake said, not looking at her. Besides, we can't afford— I can, Sophia said simply. And I'm going to. Within an hour, one of the best cardiologists in Virginia was walking through the hospital doors. Jake watched in amazement as doctors who had seemed helpless suddenly became efficient and confident, knowing they had expert help on the way. The specialist stabilized Linda and got her the treatment she needed. By evening, she was resting comfortably and the doctor said she would make a full recovery. Jake found Sophia in the hospital cafeteria, sitting alone at a small table with an untouched cup of coffee in front of her. Thank you, he said, sitting down across from her. You saved her life. You don't need to thank me, Sophia said. I did it because I love both of you. Jake stared at her for a long moment. She looked exhausted and sad, and he realized that despite her money and power, she was just as scared and vulnerable as anyone else. I don't know how to do this, he said finally.
I don't know how to be with someone who has everything when I have nothing. You don't have nothing, Sophia said softly.
You have integrity and kindness and a heart bigger than anyone I've ever met. That's worth more than all the money in the world. But even as she said it, Jake could feel the gap between their worlds growing wider. She had solved his mother's health crisis with a phone call, something that would have destroyed his family financially. How could they ever be equals when she could fix his biggest problems without even thinking about the cost? I think you should go, Jake said quietly. Back to California, back to your real life. Jake, please, just go. Sophia stood up slowly, her eyes full of tears. If that's what you really want, it is. She leaned down and kissed the top of his head gently. I love you, Jake Morrison. That was never a lie. Then she was gone, and Jake was alone in the hospital cafeteria, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 months passed without a word from Sophia, and Jake was miserable. He threw himself into work, picking up every extra shift and weekend job he could find. His co-workers not iced the change in him. Where he used to be the guy who joked around during lunch breaks and helped new workers learn the ropes, now he was quiet and distant. Tommy tried asking about it a few times, but Jake always changed the subject. His mother was recovering well from her hospital stay, thanks to the specialist Sophia had brought in. But every time Jake looked at her, he was reminded of that night in the hospital and the choice he had made. Linda never said anything directly about Sophia's absence, but Jake could see the questions in her eyes. One evening in late September, Jake was fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen when his mother sat down at the table behind him. Jake, honey, we need to talk. About what? Jake kept his focus on the wrench in his hands, not wanting to have another conversation about his mood or his attitude. About the phone calls. Jake looked up. What phone calls? Linda sighed and pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. It was covered with her handwriting, dates and times, notes about conversations. Sophia calls me every week. She has since the day she left. Jake stared at his mother. She what? Every Tuesday at 2 o'clock like clockwork. She asks about my health, about how I'm feeling, About whether I need anything. She never asks about you, but I know she wants to. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because you told her to leave, and you've been too stubborn and proud to admit you made a mistake. Linda's voice was gentle but firm. That girl loves you, Jake, real love. The kind that doesn't go away just because things get complicated. Jake sat down across from his mother, feeling like the ground was shifting under his feet. Has she been helping with your medical bills? Linda nodded. All of them. The specialist visits, the new medications, everything. She set up some kind of account that pays the doctors directly. When I tried to thank her, she said it was the least she could do for the mother of the man she loves. Jake put his head in his hands. Oh God, Mom, what have I done? You got scared, Linda said softly. You let your pride get in the way of your heart. But it's not too late to fix it. That weekend, Jake drove to Virginia Beach, back to the spot where he had first met Sophia. He sat on the sand for hours, watching the waves and thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about how happy he had been during those 8 months of phone calls and video chats. He thought about the way Sophia's eyes lit up when she talked to him, the way she genuinely cared about his work and his dreams. He also thought about the way she had dropped everything to fly to Virginia when he was angry with her, and how she had saved his mother's life without hesitation. Those were not the actions of someone who was just playing around or amusing herself with a poor guy. Those were the actions of someone who truly cared. On his way home, Jake stopped at a gas station to buy a drink and saw a local newspaper with a headline that caught his attention. California business leader volunteers at Regional Skills Training Center. The article was about a new program that taught construction and trade skills to people who were trying to get back on their feet. Former addicts, people who had been in prison, anyone who needed a second chance. The program was being funded by an anonymous donor, but the article mentioned that one of the regular volunteers was Sophia Hartwell, who came in twice a week to help with basic carpentry classes. I learned from someone very special that there's real honor in building things with your hands. The article quoted her as saying, "These skills change lives and I want to be part of that." Jake read the article 3 times sitting in his truck in the gas station parking lot. Sophia was using her wealth to help people like him, and she was doing the actual work herself, not just writing checks. The quote about learning from someone special, he knew she was talking about him and the conversations they had shared about his work. 2 weeks later, Jake's world was turned upside down again, but this time by nature instead of love. Hurricane Patricia slammed into the Virginia coast with devastating force. Jake's hometown, which was 40 miles inland, was hit hard by flooding and wind damage. Dozens of homes were destroyed and many families lost everything they owned. Jake spent the first day after the storm helping his neighbors salvage what they could from their damaged houses. The local emergency services were overwhelmed, and it was clear that the small community would need outside help to rebuild. On the second day, Jake was working on clearing fallen trees from an elderly woman's yard when he heard the sound of trucks approaching. He looked up to see a convoy of vehicles, construction trucks, supply trucks, and several buses filled with volunteers, and climbing out of the lead truck, wearing work boots and a hard hat, was Sophia. Jake stood frozen as she walked toward him. She looked different than he remembered, more confident, more purposeful. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she was wearing clothes that were meant for real work, not just looking good. "Hi, Jake," she said when she reached him. "I came as soon as I heard about the storm." "How did you?" Jake started to ask, then stopped. Of course she had heard. She probably had news alerts set up for his area, just like he would have done if he cared about someone. "I brought a disaster relief team," Sophia explained. "Construction workers, electricians, plumbers, medical staff. We're here to help rebuild." Behind her, Jake could see dozens of people unloading equipment and setting up what looked like a temporary command center. It was clearly a professional operation, not just a few volunteers with good intentions. "Why?" Jake asked. Sophia looked directly into his eyes. "Because this is your home. These are your people, and even if you don't want me in your life anymore, I still care about what matters to you." For the next week, Jake and Sophia worked side by side, rebuilding homes and helping families get back on their feet. Sophia was not just directing the operation from a distance. She was swinging hammers, carrying lumber, and getting her hands dirty alongside everyone else. Jake watched her interact with his neighbors and saw the same genuine caring that had first attracted him to her. She listened to people's stories, remembered their names, and treated everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. On the final day of the relief effort, Jake and Sophia were working together to finish the roof on Mrs. Henderson's house. It was just the two of them up there, and for the first time all week they were alone. "You didn't have to do all this," Jake said, hammering in a shingle. "Yes, I did," Sophia replied. "Not because of the money, but because of you. Because you taught me what it means to really help people." Jake stopped working and looked at her. "I was wrong, Sophia. About everything. I let my pride and my insecurity ruin the best thing that ever happened to me." "You were scared," Sophia said softly. "I understand that. I was scared too. Of what? Of losing you. Of you finding out about the money and deciding I wasn't worth the complications." Sophia set down her hammer and turned to face him fully. "Jake, I've been rich my whole life, but I've never been happy. Not until I met you. I've been miserable without you," Jake admitted. "And my mom told me about the phone calls, about the medical bills. You've been taking care of her even after I pushed you away." "I love her too," Sophia said simply. "She's going to be my family someday if you'll let her." Jake felt tears starting to form in his eyes. "I don't know how to be with someone who has everything when I have so little to offer. Don't you see?" Sophia moved closer to him. "You have everything I've been looking for my whole life. You have integrity and kindness, and a heart that sees the good in people. You have a family that loves you and a community that respects you. You build things that last, things that matter. What more could anyone want? But the money is just money," Sophia finished. "It doesn't define who I am any more than your job defines who you are. Yes, I'm wealthy, and yes, that creates complications. But I'd rather figure out those complications with you than live without you." Jake looked around at the neighborhood they had just helped rebuild. His neighbors were starting to put their lives back together, partly because of Sophia's resources, but mostly because of her heart. "I love you," he said. "I've loved you since that day in the diner when you asked about my dreams." "I love you too," Sophia whispered. They kissed on that rooftop, surrounded by the community they had helped heal together. 6 months later, Jake drove back to Virginia Beach one more time. But this time Sophia was with him and he had a ring in his pocket. They walked to the exact spot where he had pulled her from the ocean 2 years earlier. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the waves were gentle and calm. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in the hospital?" Jake asked, taking Sophia's hands in his. "I said I loved you. You also said that was never a lie." Jake dropped to one knee in the sand. "I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that my love isn't a lie either. Will you marry me?" Sophia was crying and laughing at the same time as she said yes. They were married the following spring in Jake's hometown, with Linda walking Sophia down the aisle and half the town in attendance. Jake never did get completely comfortable with Sophia's wealth, but he learned to appreciate the good they could do together. They started a foundation that built affordable housing and taught construction skills to people who needed second chances. Jake ran the day-to-day operations while Sophia